In my opinion, climate change is one of the most pressing issues in the United States today because it poses as both a physical threat in terms of things like natural disasters, diseases, and environmental degradation, as well as a social threat in terms of things like community degradation and environmental racism. Climate change can be seen as such a big overall threat because it affects all living things on Earth. This is shown in cases of animal extinction, the pollution of natural resources that we depend on for survival, as exemplified by the Flint, Michigan water crisis, and overall degradation of the natural world. Climate change is so pervasive within society because oftentimes the biggest perpetrators of it, such as big industry, are not the ones held accountable for it. Instead, it is the individual. This is exemplified by the creation of the individual carbon footprint that helps you calculate your own part to play in greenhouse gas emissions. However, big industries and those privileged individuals at the top produce more greenhouse gases in one cycle of production or in one private jet plane ride than most individuals will produce in their entire lifetime. But because of their privilege, they can use their authority and resources to create concepts like the carbon footprint to place attention on the individual. Neoliberal ideology is a huge driver of climate change. It emphasizes competition through an anthropocentric mentality where the natural world is essentially commodified and seen as the means of production for success, not as the foundations for all of life on Earth. And so natural resources are harvested at an unsustainable rate. In this ideology, business essentially holds the power within our current political climate, much to the detriment of the environment. Neoliberalism requires constant growth, meaning the consistent sapping and pollution of the natural world and natural resources that will eventually run out. However, the hyper-individual emphasis of this ideology puts the individual above all of these other consequences. This is best exemplified by big billionaires who succeed in personal growth and gain while at the same time producing insurmountable levels of greenhouse gases and social turmoil as a consequence of their endeavors, such as Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin space missions and Mark Zuckerberg's AI facilities that have pushed out minoritized communities from their homes. Again, climate change represents a huge social issue in that of environmental racism. The harmful effects of climate change disproportionately affect less privileged or minoritized individuals. These communities and individuals pay the cost of an entrepreneur's profit through the destruction, pollution, or gentrification, among other things, of their homes and lives. The hyper-individualism emphasized by neoliberalism allows society to ignore these injustices because we are so focused on our own conditions. The harm to these communities are caused by and used for capitalist gain. If society had a more collective mindset, those in positions of privilege would use their resources to combat these issues instead of personal gain. However, those in positions of privilege and power have oftentimes had environmental degradation within their best interests because the taking of resources is how they've been able to gain profit. As a result, combating climate change would be to go against their own businesses. That being said, current neoliberal values and ventures are obviously unsuitable for the environment. One way that we could combat this would be to reframe the anthropocentric mentality into an ecocentric one, where the intrinsic value of the natural world will be emphasized over its inherent use value for production. Along with this, combating climate change would also require the recognition that the United States has its foundations on stolen land. This recognition, with a more collective societal mentality, would then create and sustain a moral obligation for U.S. society to maintain and rejuvenate the land that has been stolen. Both of these previous points align with a societal turn towards green ideology, especially when discussing the connection between social justice and environmental efforts. The biggest causes of climate change mostly boil down to the practices of profit within capitalist industry. A turn towards green ideology would allow for U.S. society to unite their efforts for social and environmental justice at the same time. The unification of the social and the environmental within green ideology can be exemplified by gentrification. In certain cases, natural disasters resulting from climate change destroyed parts of minoritized or less privileged communities, making them cheaper to buy. Privileged individuals then move into them and rebuild these communities, raising the cost of living there and effectively displacing those originally residing there because they can't afford to live there anymore. In this, an environmental issue or consequence is exacerbated by economic inequality, a dynamic that is recognized and emphasized within green ideology. Climate change might also be combated at the political or legislative level. Those in governmental positions have the power, authority, and resources to make meaningful change that ordinary members of society cannot. With greater political protection of the environment, as exemplified by Jimmy Carter, the environment will be more respected and protected oftentimes because it is law. On a more local level, climate change could be combated through community participation in efforts such as Earth Day, because it would be a communal effort. The values of appreciation and reciprocity of the environment will be ingrained within the community, and it will have just greater value for protection. Individual education on genuine connections with the natural world can also be incredibly powerful. It can change your relationship with the environment to one of reciprocity, or a mindset of thinking like a mountain. And education also gives you the tools to combat these issues. You can also combat them through support for environmental restoration or preservation projects, even if you're not personally participating them, essentially using your own privilege to support these causes. And overall, the best way is to just adapt a green ideology and preserve what we have through collective effort and action, and just being vocal about these issues.